The Great Council Chamber on Nexer Prime was the largest room ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Its walls stretched up for nearly a mile, covered in glowing crystals that showed the stars and nebulae of distant space. Hundreds of alien species had gathered here today, sitting in floating platforms arranged in a vast circle around the central stage. Some were tall and thin like living shadows. Others were short and covered in scales or fur or things that had no name in any human language. They had come from every corner of the galaxy, and they all shared one thing in common. They were members of the Galactic Council. They ruled everything. High Arbiter Zelthos floated at the center of the chamber, his body made of shifting silver light contained within ancient ceremonial armor. His species, the Valorians, had created this council 3,000 years ago, and they had maintained control ever since. Every species that joined the council paid tribute to them. Minerals, food, workers, soldiers, whatever the council demanded, they received. This was the way things had always been, and Zelthos saw no reason why things should ever change. Today's business was simple. A new species called humanity had been granted provisional membership in the council 18 years ago, when they first developed faster than light travel. They had been given time to grow and establish their small collection of colony worlds. Now it was time for them to learn their place and begin paying what they owed. Zelthos raised one long arm, and the chamber fell silent. His voice echoed through translation devices implanted in every delegate's head, allowing all species to understand his words perfectly. "Bring forth the representatives of humanity," he commanded. At the far end of the chamber, a door opened, and a small group of humans walked in. They looked tiny and fragile compared to most of the aliens watching them. Leading the group was Ambassador Catherine Hartwell, a woman of 57 years with gray streaks in her brown hair. She walked with her back straight and her head held high, showing no fear, even though she was surrounded by creatures that could destroy her world without effort. Behind her came her assistant Daniel Cross, a young man carrying a simple electronic tablet. The aliens watched the humans, approach with expressions of amusement and contempt. Humanity was nothing to them. A minor species with only 12 colony worlds and a few hundred warships. Their technology was primitive, their military was weak, and their history was barely a heartbeat compared to civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Catherine reached the central platform and stopped, looking up at High Arbiter Zelthos without flinching. She had spent her entire career preparing for moments like this, but nothing could have truly prepared her for standing before the rulers of the galaxy. "Ambassador Hartwell," Zelthos began, his silver form flickering with what Catherine had learned was condescension. "Your species has enjoyed great benefits since joining our collective. We have protected your trade routes. We have warned pirates away from your borders. We have allowed you to expand and prosper under our watchful care." Catherine said nothing. She knew that interrupting a High Arbiter was considered a serious offense, and she also knew that nothing she said would change what was coming next. "The time has come for humanity to contribute its fair share," Zelthos continued. "After careful consideration, the Council has determined your tribute requirements." A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a long list of demands. Catherine felt her heart grow cold as she read them. 60% of Earth's rare mineral production. 40% of all food grown on human colony worlds. 200,000 human citizens every year to work in Council labor battalions. The complete surrender of humanity's military fleet to Council command. And worst of all, the requirement to provide human genetic material for breeding programs to create new servant species. Around the chamber, the alien delegates nodded and murmured their approval. These demands were actually quite generous by their standards. Other species had been required to give much more when they joined the Council. "Ambassador Hartwell," Zelthos said, a note of impatience in his voice, "you have heard our terms. What is humanity's response?" Catherine stood perfectly still for a long moment. Back on Earth, President William Hayes was watching this broadcast along with 8 billion other humans. Every person on every human world was holding their breath, waiting to hear what she would say. Catherine thought about her 2 grandchildren living on the colony world of New Portland. She thought about the young men and women who would be taken from their families and worked to death in alien labor camps. She thought about everything humanity had built and sacrificed to reach the stars. She thought about all the stories her father had told her about freedom and courage and standing up for what was right, even when the odds were impossible. Then she spoke a single word, her voice clear and strong in the vast chamber. No, the silence that followed was unlike anything the council had ever experienced. For several long seconds, not a single being moved or spoke. Even the floating platforms seemed to freeze in place. Then Zelthus's silver form began to flicker rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "I beg your pardon, Ambassador." Catherine met his gaze without looking away. "I said no, High Arbiter. Humanity rejects these terms completely. We will not pay tribute to this council, not now. Not ever." The chamber exploded into chaos. Aliens shouted and screamed in 100 different languages. Some demanded immediate military action. Others simply could not believe what they had heard. In 3,000 years of council history, no species had ever simply refused. Grand Admiral Vesix of the Wormak Dominion rose from his platform, his serpentine body coiling with rage. The Wormak were the council's military enforcers, and their fleets had destroyed entire civilizations that dared to resist. "This is madness," Vesix hissed. "You have no military strength. You have no allies. We could wipe your species from existence in a matter of days." Catherine turned to face him calmly. "Perhaps you could, Admiral, but our answer remains the same." "High Arbiter." Zelthos raised his arms to restore order. Though his silver form was still flickering with anger and confusion, "Ambassador Hartwell, I do not think you understand your situation. You have no choice in this matter. Every species pays tribute. This is the law of the galaxy." "It is your law," Catherine replied, "not ours. Humanity did not come to the stars to become slaves. We came because we wanted to be free, to explore, to build our own future. We will trade with any species that wishes to trade with us. We will make friends with anyone who offers friendship. But we will not bow down to anyone. That is not who we are." She took a deep breath and looked around at the hundreds of alien species watching her with shock and disbelief. "My people have a saying, High Arbiter. Those who would give up essential liberty for temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Humanity chooses liberty, whatever the cost." With that, she turned and walked back toward the exit, her head held high. Daniel Cross followed close behind her, his face pale but determined. The alien delegates watched them go in stunned silence, still unable to process what had just happened in her mind. Catherine knew that she had probably just started a war that humanity could not win. But as she walked out of that chamber, she felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt proud. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it, standing tall. They would not go quietly into the darkness. They would not surrender their freedom without a fight, and somewhere deep in the galaxy, in hidden places that no alien had ever found, the machines of the contingency waited silently for the signal that might soon come. 3 days. After humanity's refusal shocked the galaxy, the most powerful military commanders in the Council gathered in a secret war chamber deep beneath Nexar Prime. This was not a room for politicians or diplomats. This was a room where decisions about life and death were made, where the fates of entire species were decided by beings who commanded fleets of millions of warships. Grand Admiral Vesix coiled his serpentine body around the central command platform, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights. The Wormak had served as the Council's enforcers for over 2,000 years. When a species refused to pay tribute or tried to rebel against Council authority, it was the Wormak who burned their worlds and scattered their ashes across the void of space. "The humans must be made an example of," Vesix said, his forked tongue tasting the recycled air of the chamber. "Their defiance cannot be allowed to stand. I recommend we deploy the Third Annihilation Fleet immediately." High Arbiter Zelthos nodded slowly, his silver form casting strange shadows on the walls. "How soon can your ships reach human space?" 15 rotations at full speed. We have 7,000 capital ships and 3 million support craft ready for deployment. Against their primitive fleet of a few hundred vessels, The battle will be over before it truly begins. We will crush them like insects beneath our heel." Around the chamber, the other military commanders voiced their agreement. General Kreth of the Duluvian Empire pounded his 4 massive fists against his chest armor in approval. The Zephyrian Hive Queen clicked and chittered her support through her translation device. Even the normally peaceful Luminari observers seemed resigned to the necessity of violence. But in one corner of the chamber, an ancient figure remained silent. Counselor Yethris belonged to the Silurian race, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. He had served on this council for over 2,000 years, watching empires rise and fall, witnessing the destruction of countless civilizations. Something about the humans troubled him deeply. "Before we commit to war," Yethris said, his aged voice cutting through the martial enthusiasm, "perhaps we should ask ourselves why the humans refused." Thesix made a sound of contempt, a harsh hiss that echoed through the chamber. "What does it matter why? They defied us. They must be destroyed. This is how it has always been done." And yet, Yethris continued slowly in all my cycles on this council, I have never seen a species refuse tribute so completely. Others have tried to negotiate better terms. Some have pleaded for mercy. A few have attempted to bargain. But to simply say no, without any attempt at compromise? This is something new, which makes their destruction even more necessary, Zelthos replied coldly. If other species learn that they can refuse the council without consequences, our entire system of government falls apart. Every slave species in the galaxy will start thinking they can follow the humans' example. Yethris stroked the thin tendrils that served as hair among his people. I have been studying the humans since they first made contact with the council. They are a strange species. Violent and aggressive, yes, but also remarkably stubborn. They have a concept they call pride, which seems to override even their basic survival instincts. They would rather die standing than live on their knees. All the more reason to kill them quickly, Thesix said. But I wonder if we truly understand what we are dealing with. Yethris activated his own holographic display, showing images and information from human history. In their short existence as a species, humans have faced extinction many times. Ice ages that covered their planet in frozen death. Asteroid impacts that killed most life on their world. Plagues that wiped out huge portions of their population. They even developed weapons capable of destroying their own civilization and came close to using them on multiple occasions. The other commanders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the kind of discussion they wanted before launching a military campaign. And yet, Yethris continued. Despite all of this, they survived. They adapted. They overcame every challenge that threatened to destroy them. More importantly, humans are the only species we have ever encountered that actively prepares for the worst possible outcomes. They have built vaults to preserve their seeds and plants. They have created banks to store genetic material from every species on their planet. And most concerning of all, they have spent the last 50 of their years working on something they call the contingency. Zelthos leaned forward, his silver form flickering with sudden interest. What is this contingency? That is precisely the problem, Yethris admitted. My intelligence sources have been unable to penetrate human security regarding this project. It is their most closely guarded secret. What I can tell you is that enormous resources have been dedicated to it, and that it involves installations hidden not just on their colony worlds, but throughout the galaxy itself. Thesix uncoiled slightly, his serpentine form showing what might have been concern. You believe they have hidden weapons in our space? I do not know what they have hidden. But consider this. When humans developed faster than light travel, they did not immediately rush out to meet other species like most civilizations do. Instead, they spent years quietly mapping the galaxy, observing other cultures, and preparing. They joined the Council not because they needed our protection, but because they wanted to study us from the inside. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. For the first time, some of the commanders seemed to consider that there might be more to this situation than a simple punitive expedition against a weak and primitive species. Finally, High Arbiter Zelthos spoke. Your concerns are noted, Counselor Yethris, but they change nothing. The humans have defied the Council, and they must face the consequences of their actions. Grand Admiral Vessex, you will send a delegation to human space with our ultimatum. They have 30 rotations to accept the original tribute terms in full. If they refuse again, we will reduce their worlds to ash and their species to memory. The military commanders nodded in agreement. The decision was made. On Earth, President William Hayes received the ultimatum in a secure facility built to miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around him sat the highest-ranking military officers from every nation on the planet. Along with the directors of humanity's most secret defense programs, Hayes read the translated text slowly, his face growing more serious with each word. 30 days. They are giving us 30 days to surrender everything we are. Admiral Lisa Cortez, commander of Earth's combined space fleet, pulled up tactical projections on the main display screen. Sir, our analysts have reviewed the Council's military capabilities in detail. Their third Annihilation fleet alone has 20 times more ships than our entire navy. If they attack with their full force, we cannot win a direct battle against them, and we do not fight them directly, said a quiet voice from the end of the table. Everyone turned to look at General Marcus Kane, the director of the contingency program. He was a thin man in his 60s, with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of terrible knowledge. He had spent the last 30 years preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come, but knowing that it probably would. Mr. President, Kane said, we always knew this day might arrive. That is why the contingency was created. It is ready to be activated. 8. President Hayes closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, his expression was calm and determined. Tell me everything. Tell me exactly what it does. And in that underground room, surrounded by the leaders of humanity's military forces, General Marcus Kane began to explain the plan that might save their species or change the galaxy forever. Exactly 14 rotations after receiving the Council's. Ambassador Catherine Hartwell requested a second audience with the Galactic Council. The request caused great confusion and speculation among the alien delegates. Some believed the humans had finally realized their mistake and were coming to negotiate a surrender. Others thought they were making a desperate plea for mercy before the Warmac fleet destroyed their civilization. Nobody expected what actually happened. This time, Catherine did not enter the great chamber alone. Walking beside her was a figure the Council had never seen before. A lean man in his 60s, wearing a plain gray uniform without any medals or decorations. This was General Marcus Kane. He carried nothing but a small data crystal in his left hand. High Arbiter Zelthos regarded the two humans with barely hidden contempt. Ambassador Hartwell, I assume you have come to discuss the terms of your surrender and compliance with our demands? Catherine shook her head slowly. No, High Arbiter. I have come to deliver humanity's counterproposal. Laughter erupted throughout the chamber. The very idea that humanity could offer a counterproposal was ridiculous to these beings who ruled the galaxy. What could such a weak and primitive species possibly offer? What leverage could they have against powers that commanded millions of warships and controlled thousands of star systems? You misunderstand your position, Zelthos said coldly, his silver form flickering with impatience. There is no room for negotiation here. You will accept our terms completely, or you will be destroyed completely. Those are your only choices. Perhaps, Catherine replied calmly. But before you make your final decision, General Kane has some information that the Council needs to see. I strongly suggest you listen to what he has to say. She stepped aside, and Marcus Kane walked forward to the central platform. His movements were slow and deliberate, almost casual. But there was something in the way he carried himself that made several of the more perceptive delegates feel uneasy. This was not a man who had come to beg for mercy. Distinguished members of the Council, Kane began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices for the past 18 years. Humanity has been working on a secret project we call the Contingency. Your intelligence services have tried to discover what this project involves. They have failed completely. Today, I am going to tell you exactly what it is. He inserted the data crystal into the Council's display system. A massive holographic map of the galaxy appeared above the platform, slowly rotating in the air. But this map was different from any the Council had ever seen. Scattered across known space, including deep within the territory of every major Council species, were thousands of small red markers. What you are looking at, Kane continued, is the location of 12,000 autonomous platforms that humanity has secretly placed throughout the galaxy over the past decade. Shouts of outrage and disbelief filled the chamber. Grand Admiral Vesix rose to his full height, his serpentine body rigid with fury. Impossible. We have monitored every human ship movement. You could not have deployed weapons in our space without us knowing. These are not weapons, Kane said calmly. They are something far more powerful. They are gifts. He adjusted the display to show the detailed structure of one of the platforms. It was a sleek cylinder about the size of a small carg. O ship, covered in solar panels and communication equipment. Each platform contains a complete package of human knowledge, culture, and genetic material. Our greatest literature and poetry, our most beloved music and art, our scientific discoveries and engineering techniques, our medical knowledge and our philosophy, frozen embryos from every ethnic group on Earth, and most importantly, our history, the complete story of humanity from our earliest days to the present. The chamber fell silent as the delegates struggled to understand what they were hearing. This made no sense to them. What was the point of sending books and music into space? These platforms are designed to survive for 10,000 years in the void between stars, Kane explained. They will remain completely dormant as long as humanity exists. But if humanity is destroyed, they will activate automatically. They will begin transmitting their contents to every civilization in the galaxy on every frequency we know. He paused, letting his words sink in. Every species in this galaxy will receive everything that made us who we are. Our stories about ordinary people who stood up against tyranny and won. Our histories of slaves who became kings and emperors. Our tales of small nations that defeated mighty empires through courage and determination. Our scientific methods that teach any being how to question everything and think for themselves. And most importantly, our fundamental belief that every thinking creature has worth and dignity, that no being should ever have to bow before another. Kane looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces staring at him. You can kill 8 billion humans. You can burn our worlds and scatter our ashes across space. But you cannot kill an idea. And the idea that every being deserves freedom, that every thinking creature has the right to decide their own future, that idea will spread to every corner of this galaxy. It will reach your subjects. It will reach your slaves. It will reach every species that has ever dreamed of something better than serving masters who care nothing for them. High Arbiter Zelthus's form was now flickering violently, a sign of extreme agitation. This is a trick. You are trying to frighten us with stories and lies. Kane reached into his pocket and pulled out a small communication device. This transmitter is linked to the nearest platform, which is currently hidden in the asteroid belt of your own star system. High Arbiter. Would you like me to activate it so you can verify for yourself that it exists? I am sure your scientists would find the contents quite interesting. The silence that followed was the most complete silence that ancient chamber had ever known. Zelthos stared at the human general, and for the first time in his very long existence, he felt something he had forgotten was possible. He felt fear. We call it the doomsday contingency, Kane said quietly, but not because it destroys anything. We call it that because it ensures that even in death, humanity's most dangerous legacy will spread throughout the stars. The belief that freedom is worth dying for. The knowledge that tyranny can be resisted. The hope that tomorrow can be better than today. Catherine Hartwell stepped forward again. Humanity's counterproposal is simple. Leave us alone. We will not pay tribute to this council, but we will not try to expand into council territory either. We will trade peacefully with any species that wishes to trade with us. We will share our knowledge freely with anyone who asks. And we will welcome any individual from any species who wants to live in freedom among us. She looked directly at Zelthos, meeting his gaze without fear. What we will not do is surrender our freedom. What we cannot do is become slaves. That is not a negotiating position that we can change. It is simply who we are. We would rather die free than live as property. Every human being feels this in their soul. She turned to address the entire chamber. The choice is yours. You can accept our proposal and let us live in peace. Or you can destroy us and release everything we believe into your galaxy. Those are your options. Choose wisely. The council chamber erupted into chaos as Catherine and General Kane turned and walked calmly toward the exit, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be quite the same again. The council debated continuously for 37 rotations after the human revelation. What started as angry discussions about military options slowly transformed into something far more dangerous. For the first time in 3,000 years, delegates began to question whether the council's way of doing things was actually right in the private chambers of the Warmac delegation. Grand Admiral Desix met with his intelligence chief, a scarred veteran named Corvax, who had served in hundreds of military campaigns against rebellious species. Can it be true? Desix demanded, his serpentine body coiled tight with tension. Have the humans really placed these devices throughout our territory? Corvax consulted his information tablet, his movements slow and careful. We have confirmed the existence of 7 platforms so far. They were hidden with remarkable skill, using stealth technology we did not know humans possessed. Our analysts believe the 12,000 figure is accurate, possibly even too low. There may be more that we have not found, and we destroy them all. We hunt them down and eliminate every single one. Corvax hesitated before responding, something he rarely did. That would take decades, Admiral. The humans have hidden them in debris fields, inside hollowed-out asteroids, in the outer atmospheres of gas giants, even in the coronas of dying stars. And even if we found them all eventually, there is no guarantee we would find them before they could transmit their contents. Desix hissed with frustration. Then what do you suggest we do? Permission to speak openly, Admiral. Granted. I have been studying the contents that these platforms are designed to transmit. The humans did not lie about what they contain. Their literature, their history, their philosophy, it is unlike anything I have ever encountered in my long service. They have stories about slaves who rose up and overthrew their masters. Tales of small groups of rebels who defeated mighty empires through determination and cleverness. Songs about freedom and dignity that make strange feelings stir in my chest. Dangerous propaganda, Desix said dismissively. Perhaps. But consider this carefully, Admiral. Our labor battalions on the Outer Rim worlds have already begun to hear rumors about the humans. Stories are spreading about a species that looked at the council and simply said no. These rumors are moving faster than we can stop them. If we destroy humanity and activate those platforms, we will not be fighting against one small species anymore. We will be fighting against an idea. And ideas, Admiral, cannot be killed with warships. Similar conversations were happening in delegation chambers throughout the council. The Duluvian military commander found himself remembering stories his grandmother had whispered to him when he was a child. Stories about the time before his people joined the council, when they had been free to choose their own path. The Zephyrian Hive Queen noticed strange new thought patterns appearing among her worker drones. Individual thoughts and desires where there should have been only collective obedience, even among the Valorians themselves. Cracks were beginning to show. Younger members of their species had secretly accessed human cultural transmissions and found themselves strangely moved by something called music. A concept their people had abandoned thousands of years ago in favor of pure logic and efficiency. They discovered they liked the way it made them feel. On the 14th day of the endless debate, something unprecedented happened. The delegation from the Kethrani people requested permission to address the full council. The Kethrani were one of the oldest conquered species. Having served the council as laborers and servants for over 1,000 cycles, they had not spoken in open session for 500 years because they had nothing to say that the council wanted to hear. Their representative was an ancient female named Salath. Her blue skin faded almost to white with extreme age. She stood before the vast assembly with a quiet dignity that surprised. Many who had forgotten her people were anything more than workers and servants. Was a child when the council came to our world, she said, her voice thin but steady with emotion. I still remember what we were before that day. We were poets and philosophers, dreamers and builders. We constructed cities that sang with the wind and created machines that could predict the movements of the stars. We thought we were special. We thought we mattered. She turned slowly, looking at delegates from dozens of different species. Then the council arrived with their great warships, and we learned what we truly were in their eyes. We were nothing but resources to be used until we were used up. For 1,000 cycles, we have told ourselves that resistance was impossible, that the council was too powerful to fight. That survival required us to accept our chains and be grateful for them. And perhaps we were right. Perhaps there was nothing we could have done. Her ancient eyes found Catherine Hartwell, who had been permitted to observe the session from a balcony above the chamber floor. But now we have seen something we never believed was possible. We have seen a species that looked at the council's overwhelming power and chose dignity over survival. We have seen a people who would rather be destroyed than live as slaves. They have shown us that there is another way, even if that way leads to death. Salaith straightened her bent back to its full height, and for a moment she'll seem to embody all the lost glory of her once proud people. The Kathrani delegation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We do not know what will happen to us. Perhaps we will be destroyed for this decision. But we would rather die standing beside the humans than continue living on our knees before you. We are done being afraid. The chamber exploded into chaos. In the hours that followed, 3 more species announced their withdrawal from the council. By the end of that rotation, 17 delegations had either left entirely or declared themselves neutral in any conflict with humanity. The galactic order that had stood for 3,000 cycles was beginning to crack apart on worlds across the galaxy. Things were changing. Slave workers in mining colonies began to whisper the word no to each other like a prayer. Servant species started asking why their masters deserved to be served. Young members of the ruling races secretly downloaded human music and literature, finding something in those strange alien works that spoke to feelings they had been taught to suppress. High Arbiter. Zelthos watched his ancient empire beginning to crumble and felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. Certainty. For the first time, he truly understood what the humans represented. They were not just a military threat or a diplomatic problem. They were a virus of hope, spreading through the galaxy and infecting every being who had ever dreamed of something more than the life they had been given. In her quarters on Nexer Prime, Catherine Hartwell received reports of each new withdrawal with a mixture of hope and fear. She had not expected this reaction. She had expected war and destruction, not a political earthquake that was shaking the foundations of galactic civilization. Daniel Cross brought her the latest news. The Zephyrian Hive Queen has announced that her species will no longer contribute workers to council labor battalions. The Duluvian military is refusing orders to mobilize against any targets until the situation is clarified. And there are reports of protests breaking out on a dozen Valorian colony worlds. Catherine sat down heavily. We started something much bigger than we intended. Maybe that is exactly what was needed, Daniel replied quietly. Maybe the galaxy was ready for a change, and it just needed someone to light the match. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant in the eternal darkness. But somewhere out there, 12,000 platforms waited silently, ready to carry humanity's message of hope and freedom to every corner of the cosmos. Whether humanity survived or not, the galaxy would never be the same again. The idea of freedom, once released, could not be contained. 1 standard year had passed since humanity spoke its single word of defiance to the Galactic Council. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years combined. The Council still existed in name, but its power had been broken beyond repair. 34 species had completely withdrawn from membership, forming a new alliance centered around human space. Another 50 species remained official members, but had stopped paying tribute entirely, daring the weakened council to do something about it. Only the original founding worlds still maintained the old ways, and even there, change was stirring beneath the surface. Ambassador Catherine Hartwell stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, humanity's first major diplomatic outpost in deep space. The station hung in orbit around a planet that had no name a year ago, positioned at the crossroads of a dozen major trade routes. Through the transparent walls, she could see ships from many different species docked at the station's ports. Kathrani merchant vessels loaded with goods, Safarian explorer crafts seeking new horizons, Duluvian refugee ships carrying families who had fled their homeworld to find a better life, and dozens of others, species that had cast off their chains and come to join the growing community of free peoples. Daniel Cross, who was now Earth's official ambassador to the new coalition, joined her at the window. He carried a data tablet showing the latest reports from across the galaxy. "The immigration numbers are in," he said with a smile. "Applications for residence on human colony worlds have increased by 300% this quarter. We are going to need to establish new settlements just to handle everyone who wants to come live with us." Catherine smiled back at him. "I never thought I would see the day when alien species would be standing in line to live among humans. We spent so long worrying that we were too primitive, too weak, too young to matter in the galaxy. It turns out we were offering something that nobody else had for a very long time," Daniel replied. "Freedom. The chance to live your own life and make your own choices. Apparently that is a very attractive thing when you have spent generations being told what to think and do by masters who see you as property." A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Catherine activated the display, and the aged face of Counselor Yethris appeared on the screen. The ancient Silurian had resigned from the council shortly after the human revelation and had become one of the most important voices calling for peaceful change throughout the galaxy. "Ambassador Hartwell," he said, "I wanted you to hear this news directly from me. This morning, what remains of the council voted officially to recognize human sovereignty and withdraw all tribute demands forever. The war faction has been completely defeated." Catherine let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "That is very welcome news, Counselor. What finally changed their minds?" Yethris made a gesture that his species used to indicate mixed feelings. "Your contingency platforms? They started transmitting about 6 hours ago." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. "That is impossible. We never gave the order to activate them." "No, you did not. But someone else did. We traced the activation signal to a Valorian military outpost in the Outer Territories. It seems that some of their own people decided they wanted to hear what humanity had to say. They triggered the transmission themselves." Catherine exchanged a stunned look with Daniel. They had created the contingency as a threat, a last resort to ensure humanity's legacy would survive even if humanity did not. They never expected that the Council's own members would be the ones to set it free. "What has the reaction been?" she asked. "The transmissions have been playing continuously on every frequency for the past several hours. Your music, your stories, your ideas about freedom and dignity. It is causing something of a crisis among the younger generations, particularly among species that have served the Council for many cycles. They are asking questions that their elders cannot answer satisfactorily." Yethris paused, his ancient eyes thoughtful. "Questions about why some beings deserve to rule over others. Questions about whether obedience is really a virtue. Questions about what kind of galaxy they want to live in." After the communication ended, Catherine remained at the window for a long time, watching the ships come and go. Somewhere out there among the stars, 12,000 platforms were sharing humanity's story with every civilization in the known galaxy. Not weapons of destruction, but something far more powerful. Ideas. Dreams. The simple but radical notion that every thinking being deserved to be free. General Kane had understood something that the Council never grasped. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their military strength. It was the dream of freedom that had driven human civilization since its earliest days. A dream so powerful that even the memory of it could change everything it touched in the months and years that followed. The galaxy continued to transform. The old order did not collapse overnight, but it was eroded steadily by a tide that could not be stopped. Species that had been slaves for centuries became partners and equals. Empires that had ruled through fear discovered that cooperation accomplished more than conquest. Trade flourished. Ideas spread. Walls came down, and humanity, the young species that had dared to say no when no one else would, found itself at the center of something new. A community of free peoples, bound together, not by force or fear, but by a shared belief in the worth of every individual being. Catherine Hartwell lived long enough to see the first generation of children born in that new galaxy. They were raised without the constant fear of tribute collectors or annihilation fleets. They grew up believing that their lives belonged to them, that their futures were their own to shape, that they had the right to dream any dream they chose on Earth. The story of the refusal became the most important moment in human history. Schools taught it to children from their earliest years. Artists created songs and paintings celebrating it. Every year on the anniversary of that day, humans across all their worlds would pause and remember the moment when one woman spoke one word that changed everything. And sometimes, late at night, children of that new galaxy would look up at the stars and listen to the old stories passed down from their grandparents. Tales of a small blue world whose people had faced impossible odds against enemies who could have crushed them without effort. Stories of how those people had been given a choice between slavery and death, and had chosen a third option that no one else had ever considered. They had chosen to be free, whatever the cost. They had refused to accept that power made right, that the strong could do whatever they wished to the weak, that survival was worth any price. They had bet everything on a single word and a simple idea. The children would